Okay, here we are at our fourth site. We're on Yosemite Creek. We've just parked just upstream in a reserve car park, walked down the fire trail and down a little access track. We've only gone about maybe 200, 300 metres, so not very far away from the cars. So in this location, it's quite a narrow valley. I've got the valley sides on my left here, and then another valley side that's quite close by on the right-hand side. The channel's pretty small. It's probably a little bit smaller than our other creeks on the other side of Katoomba. So it's a smaller channel and quite shallow. Still a rocky bottom with gravels, and I can see a bit of sand sitting in the bed as well. So obviously that sand is moving through. Behind me, I've got a lovely looking waterfall. Be a nice place to come during the daytime in summer. It would also be a nice haven for animals to come and have a bit of a bath in that pool that is just downstream of the waterfall. Along our channel, the banks are quite low. They range from being sort of vertical to gently sloping. There's not a lot of signs of erosion, but there's definitely signs that the flow has been up and has broken the banks and flowed out over what is actually quite a narrow sort of floodplain. There's also some pools and some cascades. The flow conditions today is sort of about medium flow, partly because of all of that rainfall that we've had. No odours, and I can't see any other visual impacts as well. The riparian vegetation cover here is actually very good. You can see around us, we've got a lot of nice, dense and native vegetation cover, which is fantastic here. There is some shading of the channel, which is good. So remember, shading is good for habitat. And this is provided by our big native canopy trees. No evidence of aquatic vegetation, but I think it's more because this stream is quite a steep stream. It's got the waterfalls, pools, and then riffles and cascades. So it's sort of quite a steep stream. I don't really see any weeds around here, which is interesting because upstream is actually urban area. So this catchment is draining an urban or residential area, and that's where most of our weeds are sourced from. So you sort of maybe expect that there might be some weed species in a creek like this that drains an urban area. However, one of the things that we do find here is rubbish. And here's two examples now. We've got a piece of plastic. It looks like a bit of a green garbage bag. There's another piece of what looks like a foil lining from like a milk carton. There's another piece of plastic, and I can see another bit of rubbish. So there is a little bit of rubbish that's actually caught up in the vegetation here. Now, no doubt that rubbish is also being sourced from up in the catchment, rather than actually, direct impacts from people visiting this place. So it's been transported. It looks like it's in a bit of poor condition, so it's definitely been moving down the system. And then it's been caught up here in this sort of like log jam feature. I'm guessing that this is probably from the last big rainfall that we had, like rainfall event that we had that month or so ago. The other impact that we've got at this site is just upstream near the car park. We had a sewage pumping station. So all the sewage from the urban areas drains down to a central point, and then they pump it upstream. It's right next to the creek. And so no doubt if there's any leakage, it would have an impact on the stream here. So what we'd need to do is we'd need to test for bacterial counts, specifically E. coli, to look at the impact of that. Otherwise, there's no real other visual signs of human impacts. There's an access trail, but that's about it. It just looks like it's really stormwater drainage and transport of both gross pollutants like litter and potentially also other pollutants in the actual stream itself.
All right, so we're now going to demonstrate our macroinvertebrate sampling technique. So obviously you'll need your nets. These are kind of specially formed nets, so they're a bit more solid around the rim, and the mesh is a bit tougher than like a standard butterfly net or things like that. The mesh size on this is about 300 microns, so it's designed to get that kind of medium to smaller macroinvertebrates size class. So what I've already done is put out a 10-metre tape. So we are actually sampling along the stream along this 10-metre length. And that is our sample area. And so we move along and then that's our complete sample. We'll demonstrate the picking and finding the bugs later. All right, so at your starting point, basically you put the net in to the water, to the bottom, so you go out as far as you can, and then you're kind of dragging along the bottom and up through the veg, like that. And then you just continue on, for that entire length of the 10-metre stretch. So we keep going on through the veg, because what we're doing is trying to sample the bank invertebrate community. So there's macroinvertebrates live in different parts of the streams. So we're not sampling every type of macroinvertebrate here. We're just doing what's called the bank invertebrate community. So why I've selected this point is because there's some nice overhanging vegetation, and so the bugs like to hang out in that particular area. If we were to do a midstream or a riffle area, we'd use a different technique where we actually get into the water and disturb the rocks or the sediment and see what comes out that way. So quite simply, all you're doing is moving along that length, dragging along the bottom and bringing it up through the veg. Sometimes you do get terrestrial bugs, so you need to know the difference between your aquatic bugs and your terrestrial bugs, but that's something we'll talk about later on. So that's quite simply the technique. A few tips when we're sorting our bugs, and one of the things we need to be careful of is not just throwing out all this unnecessary stuff. So you'll see there's leaves and twigs there, but if we throw them out, there could be critters on those. So we want to brush them off, or at least check them over before we remove them from our sample tray. So a couple little tricks, give your tray a shake and you have a look for things. Sometimes you'll see things on the surface, and here we have what's quite obviously a fly. Obviously things with wings aren't going to be in the waterway, and we've got a little visitor here. And so we're only after aquatic bugs, not terrestrial bugs. What? Hello, what you doing? Sorry, little visitor here. Don't drink the water. We need to sample that. Sorry, mate. Cheers. And so a few things we need to be looking out for is things that move, and that you might think that's obvious, but sometimes they're a bit cryptic and you just need to be careful. So sometimes you might pick up a stick or a leaf and it's a stick, but sometimes you might pick up a stick like this, and I'll ask Pete to come in and see if he can get an image of this. So what we're seeing, what looks like a stick, and for all intents and purposes it is, it's made out of stick material, but if we put it in the water, and I'll move a bit of leaf matter out of the way. So down around here is our stick, if we're capturing that on film. And hopefully we'll see what happens.
Where is it? Okay, got it.
Okay. So, you know, we're looking for things moving, and I suppose the trick is we need to have a careful eye, because sometimes they don't appear as they would. And if we're still on this image, he's starting to poke his head out now. What we're actually seeing here, if you can pick that up, is a caddisfly larvae. So this is a fly larvae that makes its home, if you like, out of sticks, leaves, even rocks, small little rocks, and that's what protects it. It has its head and legs come out, and it can still move around, but the bulk of its body is protected by the casing of the stick. So, things like that, you might quite easily miss. So not all the bugs are obvious, I suppose, is what I was going to say. So here's another little critter that's just come into our screen. This is a little dragonfly larvae. You can see, and he's next to our caddisfly larvae, the different sizes of these two. And they're trying to, what the dragonfly larvae is doing is trying to get out of the light. They don't like the light, so they're burying under rocks and things like that. So, while the caddisfly can retreat into its cocoon-like casing, the dragonfly larvae like to hide under rocks and leaves and things like that. So, two different macroinvertebrates with different strategies of survival.